All right, Shabbosai, good morning. Let us begin. I want to start by thanking our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Nisan. Steve and Terry Zinn, for dedicating the Shiurim Drushos this month in honor of the birth of their first grandchild, Adin Tzvi Hochbaum. Benjamin and Elys Wohl from Eretz Yisrael for dedicating the Shiurim this month in honor of those who make the Shiurim accessible beyond the confines of the Beis Midrash, specifically Moishe, Abramson, and Jeremy Lasson. Shimmy Batsheva Messing in honor of the Bas Mitzva of their daughter Lilah, and Paul and Kathy Pollack for dedicating the Shiurim Drushos this month in memory of Paul's parents, Shmuel ben Zechariah, Leah bas Avrohom, and Tziril bas Rav Dov. We also thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Ira Miriam Grossman, in gratitude to Hashem for providing the ability to return to the Beis Midrash to davening, and to thanking those who made davening and Daf Yomi accessible over the course of the pandemic. To thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, the Plunka family, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Yoshua ben Nun. Quite beautiful. With that, we thank all of our sponsors for their ongoing generosity and dedication. All of the neshama should have an aliyah. All of the simcha, Semirat Hashem Nach should be perpetuated. And with that, let us begin. So today's daf is Yud Ches 18, and we are picking up Semirat Hashem on Yud Zayin Amud Beis 17b. We're picking up at Ba'on Kumi Rabbi Lilah. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 17 lines up from the bottom. So remember again, we're in the really fascinating sugya concerning the kelim, the utensils of the Beis HaMikdash. And specifically now what we were focusing on was the shulchan. We'll transition to were the shulchanos in just a moment. So the Gemara begins with an interesting question. Bon Kumi Rabbi Lilah. Lo hayasham lechem mahu laniach l'Shabbos haba. So we'll say, so remember again, under normal circumstances, what would happen? They would bake the lechem upon him. We discussed in the Mishnah already that, remember again, for the lechem upon him, there were 2 tables in the ulam, 2 tables in the antechamber. Right? Quick review. What were the 2 tables made of? The truth is machlokes, right? Table number 1, was it silver? Was it marble? And table number 2, gold. Right? So remember again, this does not refer to the primary shulchan, what we call the kli of the shulchan in the Beis Midrash. This was more like, I guess, what they call, for lack of a better term, a prep table. Right? So when you took the loaves out of the oven, what did you put the loaves onto? So according to the Mishnah, you put it onto a marble table. Why a marble table and not silver? In order to ensure that there's no spoilage or anything else that's going wrong. According to the Brisa, we even use a silver table, even though it heats up, because again, the whole parsha of Lechem Apanim is one of Nisan, one of miracles. So again, one doesn't have to worry about spoilage. You then would put it on the regular shulchan, which we call the shulchan, the kli inside of the Beis HaMikdash, that would remain there from Shabbos to Shabbos. It would then be taken off, and apparently, according to the Mishnah, would then be put on a gold table in the ulam for distribution. The sha'ala the Gemara is dealing with over here is, what happens if you did not take the lechem off the shulchan? What happens come Shabbos? For whatever the reason, you didn't bake new loaves, or you just didn't exchange the loaves. So what's the halacha? Lo hayasham lechem. I should say a little bit differently. If you failed to bake new lechem upon him, and therefore you have no new bread with which to replace the quote-unquote old loaves, can you leave the old bread on the shulchan or not? So the Gemara says, Amrlei, lon ksevin asat ala shulchan lechem panim lefanai tamid. Lechem panim afilu pasal. The pasuk says that you have to go ahead and leave lechem panim on the table, even if it's pasal. Even if it's pasal, meaning there is a commandment, there is an obligation to have lechem on the table. And the way the Gemara understands it is, even if the only lechem you're going to have is last week's bread, then halacha lamaisa, some bread is better than no bread. And even if technically it's the bread that belongs to a previous week, halacha l'mais, you leave it on the shulchan. So I'll tell you something interesting. This halacha is brought down in the Rambam. So this is in Hilchos Tmidin Umusafin, Perek Hey, Halacha Yud Gimel. So here the Rambam is outlining the entire process of Lechem Apanim. We're not going to go through this whole process, but suffice it to say, he says as follows: Shafilu nishar halechem im habazichin ala shulchan kama shabasos. Even if for some reason you left the lechem on the shulchan for some number of weeks, Ein bekach klum. Now, in bekach klum means it's not an invalidation. Not an invalidation. So we'll say, which is really incredible. So we'll say, what do you see from here? There is an incredible musar. What's the incredible musar? That the most important thing in the eyes of the Ribono Shel Olam is consistency. Consistency, even if it lacks a little bit of freshness. What do I mean by that? In the ideal, in my avodas Hashem, I want to be consistent and I want to be excited. I want to be consistent and I want to be hot, right? I want to be consistent. I want to be consistent, but I also want to be fresh, right? That's the goal. What happens if you can't have both, right? So we'll say, this is a shayla. What happens if you have to choose between consistency and inspiration? Which one is more important in the eyes of the Ribono Shel Olam? So you see from here that clearly the answer is consistency. Consistency is more important than inspiration. The ability to show up day after day, the ability to be lefonai tamid, right? V'nasata es halechem, v'nasata ala shulchan lechem panai lefonim. V'nasata ala shulchan lechem panim lefonai tamid. Tamid is the ikar. Tamid is the ikar. Consistency is the key to spiritual success. It's not as fresh. I'd be so much better. I'd be so much better if I just had to be on 3 days a week, right? And I'd be so much better if I could just 3 days a week, then I could really give it my all. The Moishe says, it's okay. I'll take 70% if you're showing up 7 days a week. More than giving me 110% 3 days a week. Better to have last week's lechem on the shulchan than to have no lechem at all. When the goal, of course, is consistency with inspiration. But if you have to choose between one and the other, klape shmaya, it's all about consistency. And I will say, by the way, that's not a shocker. That's true in every single relationship. Think about this for just a moment. You might be zocha to win the Husband of the Year award, whatever it is, three days out of the year, right? For argument's sake. Those 3 days aren't the most important. It's every single day that a person shows up to the relationship. It's every single day that a person is consistent. It's every single day that a person tries to live up to the expectations. Consistency is always more important than inspiration. Incredible Gemara and halacha. Hashkafa and halacha. Gemara goes weiter. Asar shulchanos asa Shlomo. Shlomo Melech made 10 shulchanos. So also we're going to see Shlomo Melech did this interesting thing where he made additional utensils. We're going to see they weren't used, but rather he used them for a bit of adornment inside of the Beis Midrash. So he made 10 shulchanos. Vayonach behechal, chamisha miyamin vehem small. 5 to the right and 5 to the left. We'll define what that means in just a moment. So the Gemara says, Ein teimar chamisha bedaram vehe betzafon. So are you telling me that he made 5 more that went to the south, and 5 more that went to the north? Well, that can't be because v'halo eina shulchan kasher ela betzafon. The shulchan itself is only kasher when situated in the north. Shene'emar ves hashulchan titein al tzelat tzafon. Ma Talmud lomar chamisha miyamin v'chamisha mismol. So what does it mean when it says 5 on the right and 5 on the left? Elo chamisha miyamin shulchano shel Moshe v'chamisha mismolo. Rather, we'll say what it means is as follows. So Shlomo Melech made 10 new shulchanos, and what he did was there was only one shulchan that was used, and that was the shulchan of Moshe Rabbeinu. What Shlomo did just to beautify the mikdash is he made 10 more shulchanos, and essentially put the shulchan of Moshe in the middle of them. He put 5 additional to the left of the shulchan of Moshe, 5 additional to the right of the shulchan of Moshe, all on the northern side. But I'll say that's one of the images I sent you out in the WhatsApp chat yesterday. Again, you could visualize. I don't think it's that difficult to visualize it, but you could see it. So the Gemara says as follows. The Gemara says, Afal Pikim, this is what we said before. Nevertheless, although there were 10 shulchanos, Shlomo Melech, in fact, only used the shulchan of Shlomo. Shlomo only used the shulchan of Moshe to go ahead and arrange the lechem apanim. Shene'emar, es ha-shulchan asher alav lechem apanim. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, akulan hayu mesader. No, not true. Shlomo Melech would actually arrange lechem apanim on all of the shulchanos. Shene'emar, es ha-shulchanos va'aleihem lechem hapanim. So we'll say, so a bit of a historical debate. So here's what we know. We know that Shlomo HaMelech fashioned 10 more shulchanos, 10 more, for a total of 11 shulchanos. They were arranged to the right and to the left of the original shulchan. The machlokas is, did Shlomo HaMelech arrange lechem hapanim on all 11, or just the one that Moshe Rabbeinu made? Good, that's the machlokas. So the Gemara goes weiter. Tani, Mizrach, Umarav, Hayunusin, Abos, and here's what's interesting. Now there's a machlokas about how the shulchanos themselves were arranged. So Mizrach, Umarav, Hayunusunin, Divrei Rebbe. Rebbe holds that they were arranged from east to west. So we'll say, I think I sent this out yesterday in on the WhatsApp chat as well. So just to orient yourself, remember again, when you walk into the Beis Hamikdash, you're walking in east, right? You're walking in east, right? You're walking to the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So according to the first opinion that says that the shulchanos were arranged from east to west, essentially, if you could imagine, they came out as a line from we'll call it in front to the Kodesh HaKadoshim, extending outwards. That's the first opinion. However, the Gemara says, Bei Rabbi Shimon Omer, Safon v'daram hayunesun. Rabbi Shimon says, no. They were arranged from north to south. Manda Amar Mizrach U'Ma'ariv Necha. So we'll say, according to the opinion that says they arranged it east to west, that makes sense. Because then really what ends up happening was the shulchan was actually situated on the northern side. It was arranged east to west, but it was arranged on the northern side, which makes sense because that's the pasuk seems to indicate is the positioning of the shulchan, and therefore all 11 of them are fit for service. Ella, the Gemara says, however, Madar Tzafan B'darim, Nimsa Shulchan B'darim. So the Gemara says, but according to the opinion who says that it was arranged from north to south, then ultimately it turns out that the shulchan is situated towards the southern side. But the shulchan is not fit for use unless it is situated on the northern side. So we'll say the Gemara ends off with that kasha. So it turns out now, two fundamental machloksim. Number one, were all 11 tables used for the lechem hapanim? That's machlokis number one. And machlokis number two is, how were they arranged? Were they arranged from east to west? East to west is the easy way to go, because halacha l'maisa, then everything works beautifully, and then all 11 shulchanos are actually fit for use from lechem hapanim. Or they arranged north to south. Again, that raises a particular issue, because the shulchan will be situated towards the south, in which case none of them are really fit for use for lechem hapanim. Good, and the Gemara ends off with that kasha. Top of Yud Chasabosem. Says the Gemara, Tani shulchan hayanasan mechatzi abayis v'lifnim. Well, so this is actually quite beautiful. The shulchan was situated from, we'll call it mechatzi abayis v'lifnim, at the halfway mark of the interior of the Beis Hamikdash, but lifnim, pulled in a little bit towards the interior. I don't think I sent you this. I know I didn't send you this picture. But again, I think you could, I'll send it to Mir Hashem after the shiur. But you could see, just if you could imagine, you have a picture in it. Good. So you could see, you just draw a straight line across the interior of the Beis Hamikdash. And interestingly enough, we're going to see all of the kelim. So you have the shulchan, the mizbeach hakitoros, the golden altar, and the menorah, are all pulled within the halfway mark of the interior of the Beis Hamikdash, closer towards the paroches. So the Gemara says as follows: So hayanosu mechatzi v'atzlefnim moshuch min hakosel beis amos, and the shulchan itself was so in the we'll call it inner half of the Beis Hamikdash, and it was situated near the wall, pulled away from the wall 2 amos. So mashach min hakosel lefnim. So it was actually in fact the Rambam brings down the actual space was 2.5 amos. So the shulchan itself was 2.5 amos away from the wall of the northern wall of the Beis Hamikdash. Beis amos umechza. So klapi atzafon, and it was ultimately, again, as we just said before, situated in the north. Umenorah kineg dabedarim. The menorah was exactly opposite the shulchan. So again, we're within the inner half of the Beis Hamikdash interior, what we call the Kodesh. You have the shulchan situated on the northern side, pulled out 2.5 amos from the wall. You then have the menorah on the opposite side, the southern side, also pulled out 2.5 amos from the wall. So the Gemara says, so we'll say, interestingly enough, the Mizbeach, which was the golden altar, was exactly at like the halfway mark of the interior of the Beis Hamikdash, and the Gemara indicates to us, and it was pulled a little bit towards the exterior. The Kulan Haya, Nasan Mishlish Habayis Velifnim. And I will say all of them were situated within the first 1/3 of the interior of the Beis Hamikdash. Good. Asra Menoros Asa Shlomo. Shlomo Melech made 10 menorahs. Shneimar Vayas es Menoras Hazav Eser Kimishpato. Vayitim Behechal Hashem Hei Miyamin Vehei Mismol. Good. In Tamar, so the Gemara will say now, the Gemara revisits part of the past conversation. In Tamar Chamish B'Tzafon v'Chamish B'Darom. It can't be that when it's that, it means that he put 5 menorahs in the north and 5 menorahs in the south, because after all, the Torah tells us, V'alo ein ha-menorah k'sheira ela b'darom. The menorah itself is only fit for use when situated in the south. Shene Emar, V'es ha-menorah nochach ha-shulchan, Al Yerach HaMishkan Teimana. So what does it mean when we say that 5 were to the left and 5 were to the right? The Chamish Mismol. Both as we said before, in fact, all of the menorahs were really situated on the northern side. On the northern side, 5 were to the right of the menorah of Moshe Rabbeinu, and 5 were to the left. So both say the same conversation we had by the Shulchan is the same conversation we're having by the menorah. So amazingly enough, Shlomo HaMelech made these additional utensils, 10 additional shulchanos, 10 additional menorahs, but essentially anchored them around the primary kliya. As the Gemara says, Afal Pikein la haya mavir ela shel Moshe bilvad. Once again, the Gemara says, as much as Shlomo made these 10 additional menorahs, ultimately Moshe only kindled the Shlomo only kindled the menorah of Moshe. Shneimar umenoras hazav v'nerosel levar ba'erev ba'erev. So the Gemara says again. So apparently these additional shulchanos, these additional menorahs, were made for decorative purposes. But once again, Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, akulan hayamav. So we'll say the same way we had an opinion. It was also Rabbi Yosef, the same way we saw before, that there was an opinion who held, it was the same thing, it was Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda. Same Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda who holds that they put lechem upon him, and all the shulchanos also held that they kindled all of the menorahs. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, al kulon hayamavish shneamar, es hamenoros v'nerosehem levaram kemishpat lifnei hadivir. So both say, so ultimately, again, quoting over here the pasuk from Zechariah Yom Ves Menoros and Roseim Levarim Ki Mishpat Lifnei Hadavir Zav Sagor. Okay, so the Gemara says as follows: V'haperach v'aneros v'hamelachim. Sorry, Zavhu mechalo zav hein kilu zavu shel Shlomo. It's changed to Shlomo from Moshe. So I will say, interestingly enough, these additional shulchanos and these additional menorahs took up, so this is actually specifically referring to the menorahs, used up all of the gold of Shlomo HaMelech. So we'll say, this is actually quite dramatic, because remember again, the menorah itself was solid gold. Shlomo HaMelech is now making 10 more menorahs. So the Gemara says that the construction of these additional menorahs literally used up all of the gold in the Beis Hamikdash. In Shlomo HaMelech's treasury. Ten Rabbi Yehuda Shem Rabbi Yassi, Hayir Shlomo Nota, listen to this, Elef Kikari Zav, Umachnisan Lekor. So also when making the menorah, Shlomo would take 1,000 kikars of gold, which is a lot of gold. He would put it into the core. I don't know what the technical name, where you smelt gold. What is it? Like a core is translated as a cauldron. I don't know, there's probably a more technical term for it. You'd put it into the core, umachnis al core motzin achu ma'amidan al echad. So we'll say, this is incredible. So you would take 1,000 kikar of gold, and you would come out essentially with one pure kikar. One pure kikar, right? Which was the kikar ultimately used for the construction and fabrication of the menorah. L'kai mashenemar, kikar zahav tar asa osa. Because we'll say, the pasuk says, you shall make the menorah one pure kikar. So the Gemara says, so now you understand, by the way, when it says that Shlomo Melech used up all of his gold to construct the menorahs, lav dafka that the menorah needed all of that gold, but the menorah had to be one pure kikar, Well, apparently, to get one pure kikar, I guess there's 1,000 to 1 ratio. Although it could be that the Gemara is being a bit hyperbolic over here as well. But 1,000 kikaros produce one pure kikar of gold. So the Gemara says, Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Bei Rabbi Yehuda, Maisa b'menoras azav sha'asa Moshe b'midbar. The same thing happened with the golden menorah that Moshe made in the midbar. V'haise yisera dinar zahav v'chnisua l'kar shmonin pam. What happened? And Moshe Rabbeinu went ahead. Moshe Rabbeinu v'haise yisera dinar zahav say v'chnisa l'kar shmonin pam v'lo chasra klom. So say, interestingly enough, the menorah that Moshe Rabbeinu went ahead and made in the midbar, measured a certain amount of gold, but amazingly enough, no matter how many times he put the gold into the cauldron, v'lo chasra klum, the gold of the menorah was never diminished. So we'll say, now we have like a machlokis and metzias. You're telling me over here that Shlomo Melech used 1,000 kikar to make a menorah made of 1 kikar. And you're telling me then that when Moshe Rabbeinu would continuously smelt down the gold, no gold would go missing. So which one is it? Right? Does gold lose some of its mass when it's smelted? I don't know if that's the right word for gold, but right, when it's smelted or not. Which Gemara says something very interesting. The Gemara says, "V'yeos hadlo yokum al barde, or barre, have a chaser sagin mindu. Kayim al barre lo chaser klum." Both say this is incredible. What the Gemara says is as follows: when the gold still has its impurities, the more you smelt it, so the more gold comes off. But once you reach the level of pure gold, no matter how many times you smelt it, it doesn't lose any of its mass. So when the Gemara over here talks about the fact that the menorah of Moshe Rabbeinu, the gold used for the menorah, no matter how many times it was smelted, it wouldn't lose any mass, that's because he had already taken off all of the impurities. It was, quote unquote, pure gold. So pure gold, no matter what you do with it, will not diminish in mass no matter how many times you put it into the cauldron. Whereas apparently the 1,000 kikar of Moshe Rabbeinu ultimately went ahead and continuously shrunk, that amount shrunk, until he got to 1 kikar, which was pure gold. So I'll just point out something very interesting about this as well, which is, we'll say this yisod. Well, we'll leave the smelting of gold. There's a lot to say about that also, about what happens when you take something with impurities and you expose it to fire. Just our way sometimes of looking at nisyonos in life. We all have our challenges and we all have our difficulties. We all have our cauldron. But understand that no one wants trials and tribulations in life. But understand what the cauldron of adversity does to you. Right? The cauldron of adversity has a way of taking away my impurities. The cauldron of adversity has a way of making my gold pure. And sometimes it takes a lot of adversity. And sometimes it takes a lot of challenge. And sometimes it takes a lot of difficulty until the 1,000 kikar becomes 1 kikar of pure gold. But what I'll also end off with this particular sugya, is what I found very intriguing is this notion that Shlomo HaMelech made, all of these decorative utensils, right? He made 10 shulchanos. He made 10 menorahs. So if you hold like Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda, that he was kindling it, then Einachinami, I understand why he did it. But if he wasn't kindling it, right? If he wasn't kindling it, so then what is that? There are so many better ways one could potentially use that gold. What is that about? And more than that, we'll say, doesn't it even look strange in the Beis Hamikdash to have 10 unkindled menorahs or 10 empty shulchanos? But I think it goes back to what we said before, which also what Shlomo Melech was saying, I think was teaching us was an incredible lesson, that it's better to be a menorah that shows up in the house of the Ribono Shel Olam every day, even if you're not lit. People like to be lit, right? But sometimes even if you're not lit, right? Even if you're not kindled, it's better to be there even if you're not kindled. It's better to be a shulchan that shows up every day even if your shelves are bare. Even if there's no lechem hapanim. Because Rabbi say, the yisod of Shlomo Melech, I think, was trying to teach us was once again, like I mentioned before, the yisod of consistency. Success in life and success in ruchnius is all about showing up. It's all about being consistent. It's always about being lifnei Hashem day in and day out. And even if you're not lit, and even if the shelves are bare, and even if there's no flame, and even if there's no lechem hapanim, but you're there, every single day. You're sitting in the Mizrach, you're sitting in the Ma'irav, you're sitting in front of the Rebbe Shalom. Lefonai Tamid, Shlomo Melech was saying, that's the Iker to success. Incredible. Bosai Mishnah. Shlosha Asar Shofar. So we're now into all of this this numbering, right? So remember again, it's all about the 13. We saw the 13 before the 13 prostrations. Now the Mishnah says Shlosha Asar Shofros Hayu B'Mikdash. There were 13. I will say now Shofros. We've seen this before. Means tzedakah boxes, right? Collection boxes. 13 different shofros in the Beis Midrash. V'kasav alein tikl. So we'll say now, what were they labeled? Here we go. Tiklin chadatin, which means new shkalim. Tiklin atikin, old shkalim. And I will say now, if you take a look for just a moment at the carbon ha'id on the left-hand side, an important explanation here. So the carbon ha'id writes as follows: Tiklin chadatin. What does it mean, new shkalim? So this we know about say shebo nostin shikle shanazu kishamagia zman truma hagizbar motzi kol shkalim shebeshofar benos on lishka. So we'll say, so just to understand this. Remember, up until now, when we were speaking about the collection of the machzas hashekel, we were speaking about the shkalim being deposited in a lishka, in a chamber, right? And we spoke about, again, the process the Gizbar would go in, make the withdrawal. Remember how many times a year? 3 times a year, right? With a basket that held 3 saw. We went through all of this already. Interestingly enough, what the Mishnah is now introducing us is there was another piece to this process, which is people would often come and they would just drop off their machzeh shekel. Now, where would you drop it off? You're not having people have general access to the lishka, to the chamber. So rather what would happen over here is there would be a tzedakah box. What we call a shofar. And I also remember again, we spoke of this already before. Right? I think we spoke of this before. Right? That the shofar, it's called the shofar because the way that the box was constructed was narrow at the top, wide at the bottom like a shofar. This way people could put in, but they cannot take out. So you would have people come to Yerushalayim, go ahead and deposit their machzes hashekel. Then what would happen, this is what the Carbonate is describing, then the Gizbar, the temple treasurer, would come, empty out those collection boxes, and then put that in the lishka. Then he would put that in the chamber. Then what would happen afterwards? Then later on, they'd make the withdrawals from the chamber. So the Carbonate either goes on. He says, "Bisman truma gizbar motzi kol shkalim shebeshofar v'nosil lishka kadei sheyitrumu mehen." So we'll say, so that was the first collection box, tiklin chadatin. The second was tiklin atikin, old shkalim. What was that? I'm thinking the Carbonate. V'asheni kasuv alav tiklin atikin. Umishalo hevi shiklo b'shana zu maybe b'shana sha'achakach b'nosin l'shofar. So we'll say, so remember again, tiklin atikin, right, was old shkalim. What does old shkalim mean? So we'll say it's interesting. So we thought that usually what old shkalim meant in our previous context was machzis hashekel of this year, which was then left over to the next year, right? We basically collected a whole amount and then it used all the money. What happens to that surplus funds? Those become tiklin atikin. Here the Gemara is using a different context. Tiklin atikin means, what happens if I forgot to give my machzis hashekel last year? Right? I just forgot. 5780 was a little bit of a crazy year, right? So I forgot to go ahead and give my machzis hashekel. So remember, I will say, once you're obligated to give money to the Beis Mikdash, you're never free, right? So in other words, I have to give it, but that goes into a different fund called old shkalim. So the Carbonate either goes on, he says, V'nosel shofar, v'agizmar notlam, v'noslam b'shiyare halishka. So we'll say, again, that goes into the sheyare halishka fund, right? What we call the leftovers. So remember again, we'll say, we saw that there's a discussion about what to do with that, right? Is that used for bedek habayis, maybe again, general repairs, or ketzam mizbeach, sacrificial offerings? Okay, back to the Mishnah. So right, we have number 1 is tiklin chadatin. Number 2, tiklin atikin. Number 3, kinin, the goes leola. So we'll say number 3 and 4, right? Kinin, bird pairs, and goes leola. So we'll say if you take a look again at the Carbon Aida, so it's Vagimel Kasalav Kinin, right? The third collection box had bird pairs, Vein Torin Gidolim, Vadalit goes leola, Vehin Bnei Yona Kitan. So we'll say the first one that said bird pairs, that was used for turtle doves. The second one was used for pigeons. So Gidolim that goes leola. Good. All right. So the Gemara goes weiter. We'll see what all of these are used for in the base in the Gemara. Next, Eitzim. There's another one that was labeled Eitzim, which was for wood for the Beis Hamikdash. Levona, frankincense, Zohav la kapores. Now, this is very interesting. So Zav la kapores literally means gold for the lid, right? But what it means is gold for klei sharis. Gold for klei sharis. Gold to be used for service utensils. Shisha l'nedava. And the remaining 6 were just general donation. General donation. So we'll say on it just said nidava. Just said donation. Tiklin chadatin shebechol shana shas. Well, so now the Gemara is going to explain each of these. So tiklin chadatin, the pushka marked, the shofar marked tiklin chadatin. That was shebechol shana v'shana. That was for the machzas shekel collection of each and every year. Atikin, old shkalim, mishalo hevi eshtakid shokel l'shana haba. Someone who forgot to give machzas shekel last year will bring it this year. Kinin, what's kinin? Hein torin. Ultimately, again, they refer to turtle doves, pairs of turtle doves. The gozle ola, what's gozle ola? Hein b'nei yona. These are young pigeons. But kulan ula olos de Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda holds all of these birds are offered up as olos. V'chacham necham sino kinin echad chatas v'echad ola. In the kinin shofar, one of the birds is offered up as a chatas, one of the birds is offered up as an ola. Gozle ola, kulan olos. But the gozle ola, which were the bnei yona, which were the young pigeons, they were all offered up as olos. So we'll see what that machlokis is about in the Gemara. So we'll say, so ha'omer, in fact, if you take a look, no, all right, we'll leave it. We'll leave it for now. Just we'll say that machlokes Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanon about what the birds are being offered up as. Just remember, Rabbi Yehuda holds everything as an olah, which we'll say effectively is going to mean Rabbi Yehuda holds that all birds that are offered up from that shofar, that are offered up from that collected money, are pretty much all offered up as nidavas. The Chachamim hold that no, the bird pairs could be offered up as obligatory offerings as well. That's the machlokes. We'll see it in the Gemara. Let's go back to this. The Gemara says as follows. Ha'omer, harei alai eitzim. If a person says, I hereby pledge the value of wood to the Beis Hamikdash, lo yifchos mishnei gizrin. Should not give less than 2 blocks of wood. So we'll say, whether that means you're actually donating wood itself, or you're donating the value of wood, minimum donation of wood is 2 blocks of wood. Levona, person says, I hereby pledge frankincense to the Beis Hamikdash, lo yifchos mikometz. You cannot give less than the value or the amount of a kometz, right? Remember, we said the kometz is the 3 fingerfuls that the coin scoops up. The levona as well as the mincha with. Zav, person pledges gold. Lo yifchos midinar zav. You can't give less than a gold dinar. That's a coin. Shisha, so the shisha and the dava. So we'll say, then remember the remaining 6 shofros were just labeled nidava. Shishla nidava. So the Gemara says, nidava ma hayu osim ba. What would they do with it? Lochin ba olos. They would purchase olos, offer up olos, va'abas l'shem, the meat would go on the mizbeach, va'oros l'kohanim, and the hides would go to the kohanim. So this is one of the ways the kohanim benefited from the nidava pushka. Zeh medrash darish Yehoyada Kohen Gadol. This was based on the drush of Yehoyada the Kohen Gadol, who quoted the pasuk over here from Vayikra, Asham hu, Ashom Asham laHashem. What does this mean? Zeh klal. Kol shu ba mishum chatos umishum ashma yilakach bahen olos. Any monies that ultimately is coming as a result of chatos and a result of asham, ultimately again should be offered up as an ola. Now, I'll say, what does this mean? Take a look at the Karban Ha'ida just for one moment. Ashom hu, or asham hu, ashom laHashem. The kashiresh l'seifa the asham hu mashma bavyasu yehi kilchasu shunecha l'kohanim v'asham laHashem mashma shekalu laHashem. The Shabbos said, what the Gemara is pointing out over here, what Karban Ha'ida is pointing out, is the pasuk itself is inherently contradictory. Because when it says asham laHashem, it indicates the whole thing should be offered up on the mizbeach. But a regular asham, yet the meat is consumed by the kohanim. So what's going on over here? V'darash Yoshua Kohen, Yehoyada Kohen, Kolshu Moser Chatas V'asham, Yilakach Ba'osar HaMoser Olos Nimta Basic Soon. So we'll say the beauty is if you offer it up as an olah, everyone's happy. The basar goes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the hide goes to the kohanim. So there's a part for the Ribono Shel Olam, and there's a part for the kohanim. Back to the Mishnah. So the Mishnah says, Nimtzu shnei ksuvin kayamin, asham laHashem va'asham laKohen. There's a part that goes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that's the meat, and there's a part that goes to the kohanim, that's the hide. Va'omer kasef, said quotes over here, Gemara quotes over here the passage from Malachim. Kasef asham v'kasef chatos lo yuva beis Hashem laKohanim yihiu. Both we'll see exactly what we do with that particular passage. Good. Says the Gemara. Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda. Lo haya shofar shel kinen b'Yerushalayim b'nei Torah. So remember again, we're focusing now on the point of contention in the Mishnah, which was the shofar for the kinen, right? The shofar for the bird pairs. So Rabbi Yehuda said in the Mishnah that all of them were olos. All of them were olos, right? The Chachamim said no. In the kinen, in the one that was marked kinen, one of the birds, remember again, both said birds are always offered up in pairs. Rabbi Yehuda said they were all offered up as olos, donative karbanos. The Chachamim say no, they were offered up as obligatory karbanos, which means one would be offered up as a chatas, and one would be offered up as an olah. To which the Gemara says, Tanya Rabbi Yehuda, lo haya shofar shel kinen b'Yerushalayim. There was no, if you take a look actually at the Karban Ha'ida, lo haya shofar shel kinen chova. Rabbi Yehuda holds Rav say that there was no such thing as a shofar which collected money for obligatory bird offerings. Right? What's an example of obligatory bird offerings? So again, the Karban Ha'ida writes, Kigon Zav, Zava, Yoledes, Sheyitnu L'socha Mos, Kashim Shayu Shofros Lekan Nidava. So I'll say Rabbi Yehuda holds that in the Mishnah, when the Mishnah makes reference to the shofar for kinim, for bird pairs, those were donative karbanos, nidavas. There is no collection, there is no shofar for obligatory bird offerings, like for a zav yoledis. Why not? Both say this is incredible. Because there's a concern of tarovis, of mixture. What does this mean? Shamatamos achos v'nimtzu demei chatos misos me'uravos bahen. Because both say, listen to this. What's the concern? The concern is, let's say you have a situation of, we'll call him Ruvain the Zav. Ruvain the Zav comes along, he puts in his coin, right? He puts in his money into the shofar for obligatory bird offerings. He's a Zav, he needs his Tara. And then Abba say, what happens? He dies. What's the problem now? What's the problem? Abba say, you can't offer up. So a Zav has to offer up a bird pair. One of those kavanos is a chatos. You cannot offer up a chatos on behalf of someone who has died. So now what's the problem? The problem is you have Ruvain's money mixed into that shofar, right? And therefore, again, potentially it would invalidate all of the money. Because now you have the mechatos mixed in there of a chatos that you cannot go ahead and offer, thereby potentially disqualifying all of the karbanos. That time we learn, Isha Shamra Hareya Laikan, Mevia Demekan, Venos Nabashofar, Vaocha Amadeis, Vaochelas Bakachim, Ve'ena Chosheshes Shemanis Atzel Bahen. So we'll say, so now listen to this. Ve'en Koin Choshesh Shema Demechatos Mesos Muravos Bahen. So we'll say, but 1 second. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, the whole issue why you can't have a shofar for obligatory bird offerings is because maybe someone like a Zav Yolev is going to drop off their money, and then what's going to happen? They're going to die. And then what's going to happen? Then their money, which is obligatory money, is mixing with the rest of the money. You have no idea which is their money, and it passes all of the money. Take a look at the Karban Ha'ida for just a moment. Before you turn the page, I'm sorry. Back on Amadal, Shematamos achas me'osel shnos lumos b'shofar, v'havele mos chatos shemesu ba'alein mu'uravin ma'ksherus, v'akol psulin, v'olech Yam HaMelech. Rabbi say, what's going to happen to all the money in the shofar? All the money gets thrown into the Yam HaMelech. Right? Why? Because you can't offer up a chatas on behalf of someone who's dead. So it would disqualify all of the money inside of the shofar. But the Gemara says, 1 second. We have another brisa. I'm sorry, I read it quickly. If a woman says, I am hereby obligated to go ahead and bring a bird pair. And what happens? Here the brisa says explicitly, she brings the value of the bird pair, deposits it in the shofar, amud beis, vochelas bekachim. And Abba says she could rightfully assume that her carbon has been offered. She can go back now and eat kachim. Ve'eno chosheshes shemanis atzel bohen, and she doesn't have to worry that maybe the Beis Midrash is not going to offer up her karbanos. Ve'ena kohen choshesh shema demechatas mesos muravos bohen. And Abba said the kohen need not be concerned that what? That maybe she died. See, Abba said what the Gemara saying over here is the shema meis lo chayshinon. Abba saying, in general, people have a cheskas chayim, right? We assume that people are alive until when? Until they're dead, right? It's a good premise to operate in life. I will say, the Gemara says, we don't assume people just die. We don't assume that. So the Gemara says the kohen could go ahead and take the money from the shofar, and he could offer up the karbanos, and he could assume that anyone who deposited the money is still alive. To which the Gemara says, you're right. In general, we don't assume that people die. Rather, ki kamrin. So we'll say, which by the way is a powerful yesod. What does that mean? That doesn't mean in life you have to presume that people are alive. In life, You have to, the chazaka is, things are good. The chazaka is things are good. And you have to go about life with an approach that things are good until you know that they're not. It's a life outlook, right? For some people, the chazaka is everything is terrible. Everything is terrible unless you could prove to me in a demonstrative fashion that something is good. Otherwise, the chazaka is it's bad. The Gemara says you can't live life that way. That's called the cheskas meis, right? That's the chazaka that everybody's dead. We have a cheskas chai, right? The chazaka is life is good. Life is good. The chazaka is things work out. The chazaka is everything is beautiful. Until you know that the chazaka is not there. Sometimes the chazaka is eroded, and sometimes things happen. Okay, then you pivot. But the proper approach to life is the cheskas chaim, positive outlook, positive approach. Seki kaminon, bechata shemesu balein vadai. So we'll say, you're right. The concern over here is we're generally not concerned that somebody died. Our concern, Rabbi Huda's concern is what happens if I know, I'm the Kohen, I know that Reuven deposited money in the shofar for Kenan, right? Because he was a Zav and he needs his purification. And then what? I know he died. I went to his Levaya. I know that he died. So now I know he's dead and I know his money is mixed in over here. Now we have a problem. Because now I have chatas money of someone who's dead mixed into the shofar with all this other money, which effectively disqualifies all of the money. So the Gemara says, but one second. There's a simple eitzah, we'll say. Breira. Just separate out money, the equivalent of one bird pair, throw it into Yam HaMelech, and say it should be retroactively clarified that the money I separated out was what? Was the money that Reuven deposited. To which the Gemara says, Ha Amrina Ba'alma, Rabbi Huda less lay breira. So we'll say, that's fine if you hold the breira. Rabbi Huda doesn't hold the breira. He doesn't hold the retroactive clarification. I've also said this is really quite fascinating. Therefore, Rabbi Huda says, if you have to bring an obligatory bird pair, you need to deal with that directly with the Kohen, right? Or whoever's in charge of the karbanos, right? There's no such thing as a drop box, right? You can't deposit money for that because the stakes are too high. Because again, Rabbi Huda doesn't hold the breira holds. If I know that someone who deposited money into that shofar died, effectively all of that money becomes disqualified. All of it becomes disqualified. But I will say, now we understand. So therefore, Rabbi Huda holds that for the shofar for Kinim, it's only nedavas. It's only voluntary offerings, no obligatory offerings. But I will say now I do understand the position of the Rabbanon. So why aren't the Rabbanon concerned about this? This is still a legitimate concern. So how do the Rabbanon deal with this concern? Breira. So I will say that's the beauty of Breira. See, the Rabbanon will say, of course it's a concern. But the beauty of it is, all I have to do, if I know that Reuven died, all I have to do is separate out the value of one bird pair. I have to discard that into Yam HaMelach, but I could salvage the rest of the money. Incredible machlokas. Good. Weiter. Rabbi Yossi, bar Rabbi Bun, Rabbi Ba, bar Mamel, boy Amar, Harei Alai Eitz. So we'll say if a person says, I hereby pledge upon myself, take upon myself, to bring wood. So we'll say in this case a little bit different. See, if you look at the Lasson of the Mishnah was Harei Alai Eitzim. So we'll say in general, when you were pledging wood to the Beis HaMikdash, you pledged 2 pieces. Because 2 blocks of wood was the minimum amount of wood that they would place on the ma'aracha, on the pyre, at any particular time. Let's say a person says, Harei Alai Eitz. I take upon myself wood, a piece of wood. So what is the status of that statement? So if you take a look at the Karban Ha'ida, right to the right-hand side, Im Amar Harei Alai Eitz, V'lo Amar Eitzim, Shlo Niskavin Elo Le'eitz Echad, Ma'ushi Yavi Echad L'Shem. So once you hear the Shaila, if I take upon myself to bring an eitz, so am I just obligated to bring 1 block of wood? Or maybe eitz automatically means what? Eitzim. And I'm automatically, and as soon as I pledge wood, I'm by definition obligating myself to 2 blocks of wood. Interesting shaila. So the Gemara says, maybe gizer echad. So the halacha is, you only have to bring 1 piece of wood. Amra blazer, masnisa amra, kevan kain, shezek karban bifnei atzma, bezek karban bifnei atzma. Because Rabbi say, even though again, the minimum amount of wood that goes onto the pyre is 2 blocks of wood, each block is looked at as its own individual carbon. So although the ideal is to pledge 2 blocks of wood, if you pledged 1, you're only obligated to bring 1. So the Gemara says, Kihadis Haninan Taman, as we learn, Shnayim biyadam shnei gizrei eitzim. Ultimately, again, the Gemara says that if you had two Kohanim, right, and each Kohen brought one block of wood. So the fact that each Kohen is carrying one block of wood indicates to us that each block by itself is sacrificially significant. The Karban Ha'ida, right, Shnei Kohanim, B'yadam Shnei Gizrei Eitzim, B'yad Kol Echad, Gizer Echad, Shema Mina Shekol Echad Kar Mifnei Atzmo. The fact that you didn't have one Kohen holding two, but each Kohen held one, indicates to us that even one block of wood is sacrificially significant. Karban, l'rabos es ha'itzim, and ultimately again, when the pasuk says karban comes to tell us that halacha l'maisa, the eitzim are sacrificially significant as well. So we'll say, therefore halacha l'maisa, again, this isn't, we'll say, these are important, you saw those to know, because we're going to have a Beis Hamikdash, and of course, who's not going to want to donate to the Beis Hamikdash? So you're going to say, right, so ideally you're going to say eitzim, but if you just said eight, the Gemara indicates to us that the obligation is only for one block of wood, because even one block of wood is significant. We will say, what an incredible musr as well. Even though the minimum unit of wood for the Mizbeach are 2 blocks of wood, even if you can't do something perfectly or completely, right? Every little bit of activity is important and significant. So even though, again, for the ma'aracha, you can't burn a ma'aracha with less than 2 pieces of wood. So therefore, you would be tempted to say that therefore 1 piece of wood is halachically or hashkafically or spiritually insignificant. Says the Gemara, no. Every block of wood, every little maisa, every action, every tenua, every movement of growth is significant in the eyes of the Ribbon Shalom. Rabbi Silber and Omar, Ovyon Amma, the thickness of these pieces of wood was an Amma. Ba'ama shochakas, and I will say that was with what they call a spread out Amma. And I will say, we spoke about the machlokas by an Amma, about 5 tefachim, 6 tefachim. This is a further machlokas about when measuring the tefachim that make up an Amma. I will say, a tefach is really the four finger, right? The width of 4 fingers. So I'll say, so the shaila is, when you're going and you measure that, do you measure that with a closed fist or with a closed hand, or like with your fingers a little bit more open? That's there's what we call it amma shochekes and an amma geduma. Amma shochekes is like a widely spaced amma, which is really made up of widely spaced tefachim, versus an amma geduma, which is a closed amma made up of tightly closed tefachim. So the Gemara says, so ovyon amma, the thickness of these pieces of wood, is an amma with an amma shochekes, va'arkan and their length is a ba'amma geduma. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Choni b'shem Rabbi Ami, kamin tortani. Actually, the piece of wood was like a tortani. I will say tortani is if you have a scale. If you have a scale and you hang the 2 scales on a piece of wood, that piece of wood upon which you hang the scales, that's called the tortani. The actual area of the ma'aracha, I will say the actual pyre itself on top of the mizbeach, was an area of an amma by an amma. Therefore, the pieces of wood themselves were made up of a smaller amma in length. Vitani kain amma hayesod amma, sobev amma, karkov amma, karnos amma, kranos va'ama ma'aracha, or Kronos va'ama ma'aracha. So we'll say, so the Gemara just points out over here that the measurements for all of these things was an amma. Then halacha l'maisa again, you had the amma, the yisod is the base, amma of the sobev, which is the ledge, amma of the karkov, which we'll say karkov was the area upon the top of the mizbeach that the kohanim walked around. Right? Remember again, if the pyre itself is an amma by an amma, you need an area around the pyre in which the kohanim have the ability to walk. Kronos, the horns were an amma maracha. Good. So the Gemara says, and the maracha, of course, the pyre itself was an amma as well. Levona lo yivchotz mikomas. Also, we saw in the Mishnah that if you pledge levona, right? If you pledge levona, you don't give less than a kometz. Ne'amar kan askara, v'ne'amar lahalon askara. So we'll say, so just to understand the kan and the halon. If you look at the tiklin chadatin for just a moment, left-hand side, ne'amar kan hainu belevona habayim mincha. So we'll say, so levona is brought 2 different times. Levona is brought as an accompaniment to the karban mincha, and it's also levona is also brought with the lechem hapanim. So it says kan means with the mincha. Ne'amar kan askara v'ne'amar lalan askara. It says by karban mincha askara, and lechem hapanim askara, ma askara ha'amar lahalan melo kometz. just like by the shulchan, by lechem aponim, it's a kometz. Av askara ha'amar lekan malo kometz. So to the lavonim that's mentioned is also a kometz. Ima askara ha'amur lehalon shnei kumtzin. By the shulchan, by lechem aponim, you're actually offering up 2 kamitzos. Af kan amur kan shnei kometz. So maybe you think by mincha you also have 2 kamitzos. Amrav Ila klum lamdu lekometz ella mi minchas chote. We'll say the paradigmatic kometz was learned out from what we call the minchas chote. So we'll say this was a mincha, this was a sinner's mincha. Now the sinner's mincha was someone who didn't have money. It was what's called the carbon ola v'yored. It's a carbon whose value depends on your wealth. Mal lahalon kometz achaser pasol. Just like by the minchas chote, if you bring a deficient kometz, it is pasol. Afkan kometz achaser pasol. So to over here, a deficient kometz will be pasol as well. So the Gemara says as follows: Amra B'Yosa Milsa de Rabbi Ila Amra Hamisnadev Lavona Mevia Bekumso Shel Kohen. So it's actually very interesting. When bringing this kometz, right, one of us will have to stop over here. We'll pick up your answer with this discussion. So we've established that if you donate a kometz, you have to bring. If you donate Lavona, you have to bring a kometz. But we'll say, what's the shaila now? What's the shaila? Who's kometz? Right, they'll say, remember again, the size of a kometz is fundamentally dependent on who's taking it. So how do you, so let's say I donate a kometz, I donate Lavona to the Beis Midrash, I have to bring a kometz. Whose kometz? Is it my kometz? Is it the Kohen's kometz? If it's the Kohen's kometz, which Kohen am I using to go and establish the size of the kometz? Gemara session to be continued tomorrow. Shkach Havosai. Morning, Daddy. How are you?